everybody, I'm Chase. I'm the education coordinator here at New Mexico Wildlife Center, and we're coming at you with a new education video this week. This week we're going to be focusing on a group of animals that are often misunderstood and not liked, and those are snakes. I really like snakes, I've always liked them, but we have 4 education ambassador snakes here at New Mexico Wildlife Center. 3 of them we can handle and take out to programs. We introduce them to kids and classrooms. They do a really great job. We do, however, have one snake who stays on site. This is Napoleon. Napoleon is a prairie rattlesnake, and he's the only animal at the center, or the only snake at the center, excuse me, that we do not handle. We'll kind of talk about why in just a moment. All right, so this is a slightly closer look at Napoleon. Now, obviously, I'm not going to be going in there and sticking my hand or the camera in there, but prairie rattlesnakes like Napoleon are pit vipers. So if you take kind of a close look at the end of his nose, there are those kind of dark pits. And what those do is they're an extra sensory organ. They essentially see in infrared. So what they can see is the heat of their prey moving by. That helps them to detect their prey, so when they get too close, they strike. Now, one of the most common questions that we get about rattlesnakes is how do you tell the difference between a rattlesnake or a bull snake or a hognose snake? And the easiest way is if the snake has a rattle, it's a rattlesnake. Now, each time a rattlesnake sheds, they do add what's called a button to the end of that rattle. Now, Napoleon lives in human care, so his rattle can get really long because he's not banging it around on anything. He's not getting into scuffles with other animals, so his rattle's really long. In the wild, their rattle may be shorter. Now that rattle's pretty amazing. It has some of the fastest firing muscles in the animal kingdom. That rattle, the muscles that control it, can fire at 50 times per second, which is pretty crazy. And you can always tell when Napoleon is awake because you'll walk by and he'll give you a little warning with that tail. Now that amazing rattle that Napoleon has is what most people fear when it comes to rattlesnakes. They hear that sound or they think of that noise and they think of this really dangerous animal. Now, Napoleon absolutely deserves respect, but that rattle on a rattlesnake is not a threat, it's a warning. There are lots of other animals that will eat rattlesnakes. Things like hawks and badgers and roadrunners will all hunt this animal for prey. So what that acts as is a warning to say, go away, leave me alone. I'm venomous and I don't want to be messed with. So we figured that we'd introduce you to a few of our other snakes that are often confused with rattlesnakes. This is the first one. This is Basil. She's one of our bull snakes. Now, these obviously look a lot different than rattlesnakes. She is a colubrid snake, so she is considered a rear-fanged snake. So unlike Napoleon, who's gonna have those really big front venomous fangs, Basil does not have that. So you'll see if you take a closer look at her head, it doesn't have that same spade shape that Napoleon had. Hers is more narrow, it's thinner. Yeah, okay, we'll cut that there, it's fine. Yep. Now the other thing about Basil and bull snakes is, as you can see, she's a lot bigger. Prairie rattlesnakes like Napoleon get to about half this size. And the last thing about Sadie that tells you that she's not a rattlesnake, there's no rattle on that tail. Now what bull snakes will do is they will mimic rattlesnakes because rattlesnakes are often not bothered. So what bull snakes will do, they will mimic the look and sound and behavior of the more dangerous rattlesnake so that predators leave them alone. What they'll do is they'll actually flatten out their head a little bit so it's got kind of that spade shape like a rattlesnake. They'll also hiss and puff up a little bit, and they'll even shake their tail in dry leaves, and it mimics the sound of that rattlesnake's rattle. So that's unfortunately one of the reasons that these snakes end up being confused with rattlesnakes and being persecuted. All snakes, rattlesnakes and bull snakes like these, are really important to the ecosystem. They're amazing at hunting small little vermin-y type mammals. So things like mice and rats that none of us want in our homes, on our farms, or throughout our agricultural areas. So having a bull snake around is actually kind of a good thing. So we just introduced you to the largest snake at the center, Basil, our bull snake. This is the smallest. This little cutie is Harley, our hognose snake. Now, unfortunately, they are also mistaken for rattlesnakes. So you see that her head is a little bit closer shaped to that of a rattlesnake, and they do an awesome rattlesnake impression. She even just did it with me when I took her out of her enclosure. These tiny little snakes are surprisingly fierce. Now the way you can tell them from a rattlesnake is if you take a look at that cute little face. Do you see that upturned nose? That's where they get the name hognose. These are burrowing snakes. So what that does is kind of acts like a shovel, and it helps her to move earth away as she's burrowing underground. Now, one big difference that you can tell that she isn't a rattlesnake, again, is she lacks that rattle on that tail. You can also see she's really little. Rattlesnakes are gonna get a lot bigger than these guys are. She's just a tiny little thing. And this is about their maximum size. Now, another big difference between a hognose snake and a rattlesnake is their underside. If you take a look at the underside of Harley, she's got that beautiful dark coloration. Prairie rattlesnakes do not have that. Another great point of comparison between between rattlesnakes and non-rattlesnakes is the differences in color and pattern and that sort of thing. So on the left, we have the skin of a western diamondback rattlesnake, and on the right is a bull snake. So you can see as we come down the animal, they both have kind of that darker patterning on the back, and it lightens as it goes down onto their undersides. But the big kicker is when you get down to the tail. So you can see the snake on the right, our bull snake, does not have a rattle, but the one on the left does. Now the one on the left is a western diamondback rattlesnake, and one of the ways that you can tell them from prairie rattlesnakes is they have that black and white banding right near their rattle. Now we talked today a lot about prairie rattlesnakes, but throughout New Mexico there are a few other species of rattlesnakes. And we talked also about Basil, our bull snake, and Harley, our hognose snake, which are both species that do mimic the behavior and sounds and actions of rattlesnakes. So sometimes it can get confusing and sometimes a little scary if you see a snake out and about and you aren't sure whether or not it is venomous or dangerous. The best thing to do with any wildlife, and particularly snakes, if you're not sure about what it is to give it lots of space. Most times with wildlife, they are more scared of us than we are of them. If we leave them alone, they will leave us alone. But if you're out and about or on your own property and see a snake that looks like it might be a danger to itself or others, please call either New Mexico Wildlife Center or your local wildlife rehab and education center, and they might be able to give you a hand. So we hope you enjoyed today's education video about rattlesnakes, and it brought you a new perspective on these animals and just how important they are to our ecosystem. Rattlesnakes, along with other species of snakes, are awesome rodent catchers, which is great for us as homeowners, but also for farming communities, and that cycles right back into everybody else. Thank you again so much from New Mexico Wildlife Center. Tune in next week for our next education video.